Uh, so, like I was saying, we do provide support for our member organizations in education, information, and resources to the public on accessing quality health services. We host the Mental Health Casey Conference every May, as well as free webinars on the second and fourth Thursday of every month. As a reminder, the views and opinions presented are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the opinions of Metro Council. At the end of the day of the, I'm sorry, at the end of the webinar today, I will provide the link and password to get the certificate of attendance for the webinar. But please remember to copy and then save the link and password, because if everybody tries to sign on right at the same time, the site will crash and you won't be able to get your certificate. So definitely wait until a little bit later in the day to get your certificate. With all that being said, I am excited to introduce James Spikes. He's going to be presenting on Play Our Way to Health. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will let James take over from here.
All right, good. Now, 1 minute into afternoon, everybody. Ooh, I got a lot of feedback. Oh, never mind, not anymore. Good afternoon. As Faith mentioned, my name is James Spikes. I am a recreational therapist supervisor for the Center of Behavioral Medicine. This topic is kind of near and dear to what we do every day when we're talking about playing in recreation and using it as a source to effectively make change in one's mental health and their activities of daily living. So I'm going to share my screen. Actually, I won't share my screen because then I can't see the chat. I normally like to have a very conversational presentation. I understand that we can't do that today, but I would ask that you please use your chat bot down there, or your webinar chat section, and also use some React. Although you can't respond, I would love for you to use the React button when something resonates with you, when you like something that you hear, or you'd like to hear more about what I just talked about. We may not have our voices today, but we have a good chat bot and a good reaction button. So please use that at your will. I actually want to start with a question. Can you use your webinar chat box there and tell me what is your either experience or your idea of stress? When you hear the word stress, what do you think of? What comes to mind? I'll give you some time. We've got about an hour, so I can wait for you. It's okay. Heightened bodily sensations, overwhelmed. These are good things. Well, maybe they aren't good things, but they're good responses. Headaches, a sense of urgency. Okay. Maybe some of you have a very recent experience with any of these mentions in the chat. Things out of norm, physical and emotional reaction to our environmental and internal stressors. Oh, you went into the definition box there. I love that. Something I'm not convinced I'm ready for. Ooh, I like that we sprinkled in a little bit of anxiety in there. I know not normally you don't get excited about anxiety or stress. Ooh, I'm glad you mentioned nervous system. We're going there. We are definitely going there today. Drowning. Okay, very visual. I'll let a couple more roll into the chat. Uncertainty. Procrastination. Yeah, I have had a large amount of stress dealing with procrastination. I'm not going to say recently, but give or take, it's happened pretty recently. All right. So everybody has their own experience, a phrase, a definition of stress. When they hear the word, something that comes to mind. I do want you to keep these definitions, but by the end of the presentation, I hope that we'll have maybe two perceptions of stress, because we have one right now. I would like to present another one. Now, I think I can share my screen if I have that authority. All right, I think you should be able to see that. Um, Unfortunately, I cannot see the chat box right now, so I have to jump in and out. If there is a message that says that someone cannot see the screen, if you don't mind, Faith, could you just let me know and I'll figure it out?
Yeah, I'll look at the chat and keep an eye on it for you.
Thank you so much. Okay, this presentation does say April 2026. This was the first time that I presented it here at the Center for Behavioral Medicine. However, it still applies. So it is entitled Play Our Way to Health, and we're effectively using physical activity to develop social skills and also promote overall health. Now, the journey that we're going on in this presentation clearly laid out. I don't know if anybody else is a stand-up fan, but generally when you watch stand-up comedy, they give you everything that you're going to need up front so that you're never surprised, but you're always aware and entertained. So I like a similar approach. I want to give you everything up front so that you're not surprised by anything, but you can also be, I guess, surprised by the nuances of each topic. So we'll start with physical activity and the definition of it. We'll talk about what that looks like in practice. We'll go through about three bodily systems, mainly the musculoskeletal, cardiovascular, and the digestive system, and how play and recreation affects each of these systems. Lastly, we'll get into social skills and how everything that we talked about before that, it kind of builds up a toolbox or a bank of skills that people can use to have a good social life and interaction with others. And then lastly, we'll talk about a little neuroplasticity. So, whoever mentioned the nervous system, I'm glad that you mentioned it because that's where we're going. To kick it off, when we talk about play and physical activity, according to the World Health Organization, it can be defined as play, sport, or any other active recreational activities. So we're talking about walking, hiking, team sports, anything that you can do to elevate your heart rate and maybe also gamify it would be a great example of play and physical activity. And the benefits of this play and physical activity include reducing all cause mortality risk, which I know is a tall answer, a tall response to saying play and physical activity can fix everything. However, as we go deeper into each of our key topics, I think we'll begin to turn around and say, well, yeah, actually, play does play a vital role in every aspect of my life. When we talk about reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease, that is one of the largest of those all cause mortality risks that we want to mitigate through play and physical activity. And also, we improve mental and cognitive health that can also lead to improved sleep. So, here at the Center for Behavioral Medicine, when we touch on those last two bullet points under the benefits that are included in play and physical activity, mental and cognitive health, and sleeping, two big things that a lot of our patients suffer from. And we are effectively trying every day to help them improve through means of recreational therapy. Now, when we talk about hormonal change, this is a bit specific to the Department of Mental Health in general, especially when we're talking about recreational therapy or we're talking about any type of physical play or activity in unison with clinical therapy, we will effectively be a part of these hormonal changes, mainly epinephrine or adrenaline, which increases heart rate, blood pressure, and energy production. So you think about the levels of epinephrine or adrenaline when you're going for a run or riding a bike or entering a new park or a new place as you take a long walk. These are the types of hormonal changes that one can experience, along with endorphins, the feel good hormones. We're talking about reducing pain, especially those dealing with chronic pain, actually lowering stress, and enhancing mood. A good example of that would be runner's high. A lot of people, I don't know this in particular because I hate running. Oh, I won't say I hate running, but me and running don't have a good relationship. But some people say that they get a runner's high, and it is due to a direct impact of the hormonal cascades of endorphins that come from having stress being put on the body, which is the first time I like to introduce a new perspective to stress. In this instance, we're talking about lowering stress through activities such as running. However, we are using physical stress to combat whatever this internal stress is, mainly stress on the legs and the cardiovascular system, as well as the respiratory system, to create a positive effect like feel good hormones, an increase in adrenaline, also a rising of cortisol levels that will allow us to continue on this run and maybe not pass out on the run like I would. We also, glad that got that out of my way. We also have a release level of cortisol, which is also something or a hormone released during high stress situations. Again, so we don't pass out during this run. It revs up our metabolism of fat so that we can provide more energy when we're doing this play and physical activity. And the more that we do it, the better primed our bodies are to release these hormones and also to be able to convert this fat or sugar into energy. So the more that you do it, the more physical stress you put on your body, the easier it will be to do play and physical activity. Now, when we get into play, the intensity does matter. And I'm not saying that everything should be high intensity, but I think it's important to note what type of physical intensity you're placing on your body and how many times you think you're doing it within a 5 to 7 day span. So when we talk about moderate, and I think if anybody's ever, went to a gym, had a personal trainer, ever went on a fitness journey, you will hear the term moderate to vigorous physical activity. The moderate, fortunate enough, we can do a lot of it very easily or build it into our life and it all adds up. So we're talking about hiking, walking, a bit of strength training, stretching, some both kinetic and static type of exercises like the yoga pictures that you see here. And these activities can also be gamified. I'm really big on gamifying a task that I really don't want to do. Mainly running, although I hate it. It's a stress that I put on my body so that I can at least say that I tried. But it adds a bit of boost of engagement. It adds a little bit of motivation, and it can also help with skill retention as opposed to just presenting like a walk or a hike to someone. How fast can we get here in a certain amount of time? Is there a scavenger hunt? Are there marquees on this hunt or on this walk or hike that we can pay attention to so that we can keep ourselves engaged while we're doing this physical activity? And then before you know it, we forget that we're doing a moderate physical activity and we get more into play. When we get to the vigorous exercises or vigorous play, vigorous physical activity, this is mainly what we deem as exercise, actually going to the gym, elevating our heart rate, going on a run, going on an uphill hike, and also team sports. When we get back to gamifying and how it can effectively mask the stress that we're putting on our body, because we also have, again, this raising of adrenaline and endorphins that allow us to enjoy the stressful activity that we're doing. Again, sprinkling in that word stress and maybe changing our definition or our perspective of it. And lastly, every bit counts. The average that is considered for the World Health Organization is about 1500 or sorry 150 to 300 minutes of moderate activity, which is about anywhere from 2 to 5 hours a week. And then as far as vigorous activity, 75 to 150 minutes, that's anywhere from an hour to maybe 2.5 hours per week. So it's very doable. I think it's something that we have to have a concerted effort to place these actions in our lives. However, it is very doable. And again, if we can mask the activity, if we can gamify the activity, if we can play a team sport, not only are we having fun, but we're also putting a good form of stress on our musculoskeletal, digestive, cardiovascular system, but we're also training our body to enjoy a level of stress, meaning I'm going to introduce a word, eustress, that allows us to maybe take in an internal stress and target it towards an external stress, such as exercise and team sports. Now, we'll take this stop on the musculoskeletal system. I'm going to just read this definition, but then I want to ask a couple of questions about these three pictures we have here. So, the musculoskeletal system controls weight bearing and locomotion activity, mainly being the weight of our body or the things that we carry, and also getting from point A to point B, picking things up. A lot of the everyday tasks that we may take for granted is controlled by our musculoskeletal system. When we're engaging in physical activity, not only improves our motor skills, but also directly affects brain health and function and can reduce anxiety and depression. So I like to pose my second question now. When we think of mobility, not only the benefits of mobility, but maybe um, the lack of mobility. What kind of things or effects can one have in their life by either having an access of mobility or a lack of mobility? Can we get in the chat and talk about that? Please take your time too. I know that's a loaded question, but mobility. What ways can mobility affect someone's life? Does make it hard to travel. I like when my body gives me the flexibility to choose what I can do versus limit me and my options. Absolutely. Definitely social connection and isolation. That's a big one. Independence, a lack of mobility is incredibly frustrating. Absolutely. Daily functioning like self-care, cooking, exactly things that we, have our activities of daily living maybe might take for granted. The lack of changes you do daily things, absolutely, you might lose a variety of things you can do based on what you the type of mobility you have access to. Getting tasks taken care of, more mobility decreases pain. Absolutely, there is kind of a cyclical kind of relationship between that mobility and pain that I like to talk about in a little bit as well. Access to healthcare, being able to be in certain spaces comfortably, big emphasis on being in those spaces comfortably. I can get there, but once I get there, what am I actually able to do? There is a room that seems common to us, may seem like a room full of obstacles for another person. Having asked for help, lack of leisure opportunities, limited professions, and exhaustion. Mobility definitely equals longevity, 100%. I'm a recent, actually, this was inspired by a therapy that I've done maybe a couple of weeks ago. Done a small bout of solo Zumba classes online. So if anybody is interested, I'll send you a link. Limited professions and exhaustion, mobility equals longevity, hard to care for other people like children, absolutely. And also, it can affect your mental health. So, I think we have a good grasp of how mobility and the lack thereof can affect someone's quality of life. Ultimately, I have another question. Actually, I don't have another question because all the questions I was leading up to, you answered them. These are a good group of 44 people. I like you. I think we'll continue to do this. Let's just do it another month after this. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. Let's talk about it. All right. So we mentioned a lot of things when it came to mobility and how it can impact one's life. When we're talking about controlling the movements of joints through a range of motion, strictly talking about a musculoskeletal topic here. Can I put one foot in front of the other and get from point A to point B? When we work on this mobility and we have the ability to increase it, we are going to definitely aid in preventing injury. There are a lot of preventative exercises and preventative activities that we can do in order to maintain a pretty active and mobile lifestyle, especially over the course of our life. And in tandem with flexibility training, so not only strength training, but also working through moving these joints through a greater range of motion than the day before, we will definitely have a good bout of preventative exercises and routines that we can do to maintain strong and healthy joint and muscular relationships. I would also say to target, if you were ever thinking about how can I work on my mobility and flexibility, you can target these large joint structures like hips, knees, and ankles, especially. That's how we get around. And several parts of our spine, from our cervical spine all the way to our lumbar spine, and making sure that the relationship and movement that we have is effective and that we're not compensating on one side or another side because that could lead to further injury. A couple of you mentioned social connection. And that social connection, it gives us a sense of belonging. It is a fundamental human need to belong to a group of people, a culture, a group of activities that you can do. It is a fundamental need. So to be able to exercise your mobility and your autonomy And to increase that autonomy will lead to more social connection, a better quality of life, and also able to have more possibilities and more aspects of your life than just one, from career to the type of social activities that you can partake in, and the longevity of your life in total. And then lastly, reduced pain. I think someone mentioned mobility, or an increase or excess of mobility can reduce pain. Yes, this pain and stress and pain and mobility, they have this cyclical relationship. And I might continue to mention that so that we can understand that a simple action can effectively target a very complex problem. So when we talk about reducing pain, especially those experiencing chronic pain, more mobility, strengthening of muscles, especially around joint structures, can train the body to become less receptive or less perceptive to a pain. It can alleviate the stress on joint structures on several parts of the body. And it also allows us to avoid overcompensation in one part of our body or another. This can also be, a much larger metaphor for not overcompensating in one part of our life for another. For instance, if we pour ourselves into our work a whole lot and then we don't pour ourselves into our leisure skills, we can effectively increase the level of pain that we have, the level of stress that we have. And so creating that balance not only in our lives, but in our musculoskeletal system, they have the same result, or we are approaching the same problem by increasing our mobility, increasing the number of activities that we are able to do. All right, let's talk about the cardiovascular system. Again, I'm going to read, but I want you to give me an answer after this. So wait for the question. I promise you it'll be a good one. Cardiovascular health refers to the proper functioning of the heart and blood vessels. This takes into account nutrients absorption at the cellular level, immune responses, and hormone release and transport. All right. I've got to see those chat answers. I'm going to hold on, stop sharing my screen for a second. So if anyone had a great analogy or example of what this cardiovascular system does, feel free to drop it in the chat. If you don't know, you can say I don't know too. I'd rather have an answer than no answer at all. But if you had like a great example or an analogy for this cardiovascular system, what would you say? Hard to care for other people. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm reading in the past. Let's look here. Okay, Bethany, it's okay. A lot of people don't know, and we're going to find out today. We're going to make it real easy, hopefully. If it's not easy, I apologize. Ask Bill Nye, the science guy. He might know more than me. Fuels our engine. Absolutely. It is a pump, and it relies on pressure. I feel like I stumped some people with this one. I'm not proud of that, but I am a little bit because now we can learn something. All right. All right. Not everybody at once. I'm going to wait a little longer. Really quickly, anybody ever watch Osmosis Jones? You should do it again. Watch it again and, you know, look at it from an anatomical perspective. Change your life. Electricity wiring in a home. Oh, I like electricity wiring in a home. I'm gonna save that one for a later time in this presentation, but that is a good one. Compared to Robin, you're on to something. Compared to a transportation system, I really like this. I'm gonna keep this transportation system and this electricity wiring in a home. There's a good comparative thing going on here in between a couple of systems we'll talk about. All right, I'll leave just a little more time and then I'll jump back. Actually, yeah, I'll jump back in. Sorry. I get a little excited about this. All right, going once, going twice. Sold to Metro Council. Okay, I'm going to share once more. So, When we talk about the purpose of this cardiovascular system, one or first the analogy. The best analogy that I like to present is like a lazy river that runs on pressure. This lazy river is going to be transporting a lot of things so that our body can continue to function. And I also use the term lazy river because it's a lot slower than another one of our systems that also transports things across the body. I'm going to give you just a little inkling into the future. It's slower than the nervous system. They may both be transporting information, but the nervous system is a whole lot faster than this cardiovascular system. Now we're talking about what's traveling in this cardiovascular system. Well, the biggest thing is blood. It's a whole lot of blood being pumped, red blood cells being created like every 3 months. Like it's happening a lot. But that is like only the surface level. What we really should pay attention to is what is actually being transported in this blood. One of the biggest things for us is nutrients. Nutrients, and I mean micronutrients down to the cellular level, the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in between cells so that our muscles continue to quote unquote eat, but also the transport of hormones. Our hormones travel slowly through this cardiovascular system in a method called a cascading effect. So when we think about our cardiovascular health and how well our heart can pump blood throughout our body and how well it can, excuse me, transfer nutrients and waste between cellular barriers, and also how well it can transport hormones from the hypothalamus to every other cascading gland we have in our body, then we might be able to understand a little bit that our cardiovascular health, it helps us to regulate our hormones and also our overall health. And I say hormones in particular because of the population that we serve here at CBM. We'll get into that a little bit. So, when we're talking about the purpose of this system, again, as I mentioned, it's a constant delivery of oxygen, nutrients, and hormones to the body's tissues, and also removing waste. When it's adequately functioning, we have a domino effect of when it's inadequately functioning, we have a domino effect of malfunctions that can occur in our body. One of the biggest examples, and it has nothing to do with the medications down here, the psychotropic topic that I have under medications. But one of the greatest examples of a relationship between hormones is glucose and insulin. And their relationship is when there's too much insulin, I need to produce or I need to allow my cells to metabolize glucose so that we won't have excess of insulin. And when there's too much glucose, I'm going to allow a cascading effect of insulin to be introduced so that we can metabolize this glucose and get rid of it. Again, having nothing to do with our particular topic, but it's a great understanding of how our hormones have a relationship with each other and how the things that we can do, like controlling our diet and also getting active so we can have a great cardiovascular functioning, can help us to mitigate this relationship between hormones without talking about medications. Of course, we will get there. When we talk about stress induced problems with the cardiovascular system, once again, stress and pain have a cyclical relationship where one intensifies another. In the instance of our cardiovascular system, we have a stressful task that we want to achieve over the course of a week, and we don't know how to deal with it. So we begin to not be as active and maybe have some sort of depressive activity like an excess of eating and sitting down in dark rooms and watching our favorite rom-coms. And we are stopping the amount of good stress that we place on our body when we do things like group activities and play and sport and walking and running. We then put more stress on our cardiovascular system because it's working harder because of the lack of activity that we've done, the bend in our knees because we've been sitting down all day and the circulation to our toes are not as good as they could be. And we start this entire cycle of one stress caused me to react in a certain way. And now I have another stress placed on my body internally, and it's a continued cycle. But if we were to establish an activity like play or a simple recreational activity that we can commit to doing even when we don't feel the best, we can put a positive stress on our body that may lead to a positive impact on the external stress that we have, like that hard and strenuous task that we don't know how to achieve within that week. And lastly, what is near and dear to our heart and CBM is our population who are ingesting medications such as olanzapine and clozapine, which are common psychotropic medications. But what we fail to, I wouldn't say what we fail to understand, but what we may understate is that these medications can put a certain amount of stress on our cardiovascular system as well, along with effects like gaining weight. So, in order to combat these, what would seem like negative effects, we can increase the amount of activity that we do and possibly aid in the clinical process, along with medication having a positive response in the lives of our clients. So it's a thing, again, just like mobility, where we don't often think about the lack of quality of life one can receive with having a lack of mobility. Also, we sometimes forget that there are adverse effects to something that should have a positive outcome for our patients. So, we want to again introduce play and recreational activity to combat those negative effects that we may see. Anybody need, I don't know, a time? You need me to clarify something? I know a lot of things are going on right now. I'm a little confused myself. I'm just kidding. But, oh, there's some things in the chat. Oh, mitochondria, oxygen. Absolutely. Mitochondria, I believe, is the powerhouse of the cell. Some people believe we would not exist without a mitochondria. Also, the oxygen and that oxygen and carbon dioxide relationship, the constant waste, and the excuse me, the revving up of this exchange when we become more active. Better cardiovascular health deals with better nutrients across all tissues of our body. So when you get out of this chat, I encourage you to walk 10 minutes. 10 minutes can change the next 2 hours of your day. Any questions right now? Any comments? Anything that I should revisit? Like I said, I know this could be a lot at once, but I want to give you some time. I'm already feeling antsy inside. Yes, Bethany, let's go walking. Start a walking group. Anybody have been to the mall? I don't know, at like 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and you see those walking groups by a specific population of people that understand that prolonged mobility means you have to keep going. When you stop, you probably won't get back up again. Okay, nobody goes to the mall in the morning. That's cool. All right, I'm going to go on to our digestive system. Share my screen really fast. All right, let's talk about digestion, which my hope, if you don't get anything else from this presentation, I hope that you leave here talking about digestion with everybody. Talk about it with your spouse and your siblings and maybe a coworker. I don't think you should go too in depth about your digestion. Like, we don't need to know every bowel movement you had in the past week, but I think it's a very important conversation. So have a conversation with somebody. All right, when we're talking about digestion's front facing responsibility is to break down food to process nutrients for energy, growth, and repair. But what's understated is the digestive system's relationship to the nervous system, even being referred to as the second brain, also referred to as the enteric nervous system, because there are so many neurons within the gut. It has to have its own nervous system title. I don't know if anybody knew that, but it's your second brain. So, and I'll stop sharing for a bit because I have a question and I want to really hear about this one. When's your last bowel movement? I'm just kidding. That's not the question. The question is, what types of um, what types of effects would it have on one's life to not have proper digestion? What types of things do you think people go through, either psychologically, physically, when there is not a good digestive functioning? A lot of pain, absolutely. Of terrible digestion. That sounds sluggish and awful, bloated, miserable, fatigue, poor nutrition, absolutely. Being uncomfortable, absolutely being uncomfortable. Look at us talking about bowels. We're growing together. It is toxic. It can become toxic. I like that you mentioned embarrassment. I think that's one of the main reasons people do not share about their bowels. It's due to embarrassment. And if embarrassment is the thing that's stopping us from having great bowel movements, we got a long fight ahead. Shame, anxiety about going places if you have irregular bowels with diarrhea out of the blue. Absolutely. And a lot of times we mention when we talk about like digestive problems, I think at least my mind goes to a lack of bowel movement, but also uncontrollable bowels. That's an entirely different thing to deal with. Very nice. I, he's a very knowledgeable group here. I'm glad that we got to talk about these bowels. All right, let me continue to share my screen. All right, so we mentioned it. We talked about nutrients absorption and how having a lack of bowel functioning can affect your nutrients absorption. We talked about the stigma-induced silence, not only for having bowel incontinence where you don't have a lot of bowel movements, but also an excess of bowel movements. But one thing I want to drive home is also this brain and gut relationship, that neurotransmission, very important and an understated aspect of the digestive system. So when we talk about that nutrients absorption, digestion facilitates the body's major nutrients and also water absorption efforts. When we, have our bowel movements and we have that last trip down the large intestines, that very last trip is us absorbing all of the water or liquid nutrients that we can from this waste before we expel it from our body. So it is very important to have the type of stool that your doctor prescribes you to have. More liquid stool can lead to dehydration because we're losing all of that water absorption that we were supposed to have in that last little bit of digestion. When we talk about poor gut health and high stress levels, also dealing with psychotropic medications, this could put our patient's body and also our bodies all out of whack. It can lead to inadequate dispersion of the medications, which can, if a patient isn't talking about the poor digestion, we can unsafely assume that the medication just isn't working and maybe we should try something new. When in reality, we have a lack of activity, poor digestion, and a lack of water absorption, leading to inadequate dispersion of the medication. So, again, a very small introduction of play and recreation can make a large change in someone's lives, especially our patients. When we talk about neurotransmission, our enteric nervous system, large connection of neurons that can operate independently from the brain, legit independently from the brain, and a part of the central nervous system, but also has its own name, the enteric nervous system. How powerful is it? Well, about 90, well, it's 95%, but I've also seen sources that say about 90%, but still it's a very large amount. About 90% or more of serotonin can be found in the gut and released in the gut. When we go back to good sleeping regimen, when we talk about how effective play and recreation can lead to better sleeping patterns, we also are tying back into gut health. And now this play and recreation can lead to better gut health and also lead to better sleeping regimens. So there's again this intertwined relationship and also cyclical relationship between the stresses that we're putting on our body, the types, the one that we choose and the ones that are imposed on us, and then the effects that it has in the end. And lastly, this stigma induced silence. We'll say it again, and I'll be more specific this time. your siblings, your spouse, your parents, and maybe your closer relatives. Yes, you should ask them if they had a bowel movement today. Everyone else, maybe you should just constantly remind them of how important it is. But it is a very important conversation that I hope you'll leave today with being able to talk to anybody about, especially when you see that someone may be having higher levels of stress. Maybe they're acting out of their baseline. It is something to consider. How have you been eating? How have you been moving? How often have you been moving? How has your sleep been? And then lastly, have you been having good bowel movements? I think this is a great conversation. I think that, I believe that all of you have good tact and you can approach the conversation in a good way. But it is something important to ask about. If we are suffering because we are ashamed to talk about our bowels, we got a long road ahead. So talk about them. Whoa, she came up a little fast. I'm sorry about that. I'm about to play a video. This video is dealing with, um, I guess, a social agreement when we agree to play a team sport with other people. I want you to watch the video, and then I got a question for you. Let me stop sharing for a second. I just want to see something really fast. Did I stop? I think I stopped. I'm not sure. I also want to read the chat for a second. When I'm outside hiking all day, yes, Shannon, I was about to switch topics, but I'm glad I read your sentence. I take every morning maybe 20-minute walk, and that has drastically improved my digestive health and what I'm able to do over the course of the day when it deals to digestion. So absolutely, like I said, a 10-minute walk can change 2 hours of your life. Not a joke. All right. Again, I'm about to play a video. Just listen to her. It might be a little bit funny, but I have a question for you afterwards. Here we go.
Hey, James, if there's sound, we're not able to hear the.
Oh no, I was here. Okay. I want to really try to figure this out for a second because it's an important thing. Okay. Stop sharing. More settings. Audio. Uh Speakers. Okay. I'm gonna change something really fast. Let me know if this works. All right. Is that work?
No, it did not work.
I'm gonna be so sad. All right.
Maybe you could just act it out for us.
I will. Okay. Can you still hear my voice?
Yes,
No, you
yes,
can't.
we can.
Oh, okay, never mind. All right. I'm gonna just act it out. So she is amazed, having a conversation. I think she mentioned husband, boyfriend, I don't know. But she's having a conversation about people showing up to basketball courts and they instantly know what to do. They'll show up with a ball, and then people will say, who's playing? And then five people over there and five people over there will assemble a team. There's no lists, there's no charts, there's no round robin sign up sheet. They know how to start a team and they will play a game. They don't have matching shirts. Sometimes there's shirts and skins, but neither here nor there. When a team loses, there's a peaceful transfer of power. Five people will leave. Five more people will continue to come on the court, and they will play another game of basketball. And when a team may win too many times, they will effectively decide this team is too powerful. we probably need to shuffle up the teams. Let's break this up. You guys start a team, we start a team, and we'll have another game of 5-on-5. And this will continue over and over again. There is no there's no messages ahead of time. People will just show up to the park, and there will be people, and they will already know how to play this game. She then goes on to make a joke that she would be very nervous showing up to the court. She'd bring a lot of snacks. She'd bring a clipboard, try to write everybody's names down, make sure everybody likes her. Her own personal opinions, but it was a funny part of the video. But can anybody maybe make a comment on what she's describing as it pertains to social skills? And I'll give you some time for that as well. That kind of spontaneous play with strangers is almost unheard of anywhere else. Absolutely. Absolutely. We put a ball in the middle of a court, and all of a sudden there is cooperation, there's understanding. And again, just leaving room, it's not a bad thing when there's a lull in the conversation. I'll wait for you. Oh, there's another. Kids are so good. Yes, childlike play. They are so very good at it. And also, there is room for everyone. There's absolutely room for everyone. I would also add that these are we're talking about these social skills and these social agreements that we can understand in the realm of play. But then there are a lot of coaches or a lot of people that come from a kinesiology background. A lot of people that talk about every life skill that you can learn in a team sport. And these are one instance where there are a lot of things that you can learn in a team sport, like coping skills and understanding that if I lose, then it's my turn to get off the court and I have to let other people have a turn. And there's also an agreement between people who say you can take a shot and I can take a shot, and I won't ball hog and you won't ball hog. Unless you really can't shoot, then you might not get the ball again. I'm just kidding about that too. There is there is an aspect of taking people for kind of who they are, not a real big judgment. You may have seen somebody in a previous game that, you don't think they're the best player, but they still have a right to play on the court because they showed up to the park. Similarly, when we talk about everyday tasks like going to a store and the type of agreements that we make while going to a store, like no shoes, no shirt, no service. So many times, I mean, sometimes you show up without either of those. But for the most part, people understand I need to be presentable when I go to the store. And when I get to the cash register, I have to wait my turn for the next person. I cannot jump in line, or at least it's frowned upon to jump in line. And when I get to the register, I need to wait for the attendee to tell me what it is that I should pay and tell me if I have any coupons that work. And then lastly, make a peaceful transfer of money across a register and leave out, return my basket, go to my parking spot, don't hit anybody else when I get to my parking spot. Again, this is a very different task, but these are all agreements that we've made with everyone else around us that we all understand, and is made possible through activities like these. So, as much as this is good for the systems, the bodily systems that we just talked about, is also teaching us important lessons about how to have good social skills, good coping skills, and how to make appropriate decisions in any walks of our life. I wish you could have heard her say it a little bit more funny, but I'm glad that we got to the point. I'm going to share my screen again. Whoa. And then the last thing we will get to here, it is neuroplasticity. Now that seems like a big made up word, and it is, well, somebody made it up, but we actually use it. What is it? It is the brain's ability to recognize its structure, its function, and the neural connections in response to learning, experience, or injury. If I had to simplify that, it's our brain's ability to make new pathways so that we can learn a new skill. Although our greatest propensity to use or develop neuroplasticity is going to be those first 3 years of our life. That's where we're soaking up everything like a sponge. But this neuroplasticity never leaves us. It's just the way that we can engage it is different. After those first 3 years, there's still a high ability for us to develop new neuronal pathways, to learn new skills, to respond to things in different ways. But the older we get, the more concentration that we have to develop these skills. Where we just mentioned in the chat how it's so easy for children to have this spontaneous play. But in our adult lives, we have to try a little bit harder to maintain that spontaneity and to be able to, have this good level of eustress. I'm bringing it back up again, placing that on our lives because it may be a stressful situation to talk to a stranger at this time in our lives, as opposed to when we were 5, 6, and 7 years old. And it may also be a bit more stressful to go out and do semi athletic activities like we used to do when we were children as well. But these interactions and these activities, they increase the neuroplasticity that we can have, which ultimately means we still have an opportunity to learn, to develop new skills, to develop new activities in our lives that will ultimately increase the functioning of all the systems that we talked about earlier and also raise our quality of life. So when we talk about how all of these things are related, including neuroplasticity, our body uses this ability to relearn behaviors, to recover from injury, to improve our cognitive fitness, and also to adapt to new skills. And I know we're talking about play and recreation, but this is not solely the ends to this means is not to learn how to play better. The ends to this means is to learn how to have a better quality of life that expands past play, that expands past recreation, and it goes into our physical, our cognitive, our mental health. How all of these things have a cascading effect when we just get out and play and implement a little bit more recreation in our life. So, with that being said, I want to open it up to questions or comments, but two, I encourage all of you to one, take 10. If you could do 20 minutes of a walk today, that would be fantastic. 20 minutes of a walk, put 4 songs on that you like, you forget that you were even walking. And then lastly, as the weekend is coming up, pick a park to go to and go to it. All right. With that, any questions, the comments, the concerns? If you want that certificate, the certificate link is there. My last name is in the password, so it should work. And I appreciate you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you
Ooh,
so much, James. Yes,
thank
somebody
you.
did ask if you could share the video link in the chat.
I can hold on because when I did it, I downloaded it. It wasn't a link. Let me see what I can do.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to give everyone a reminder that the webinar was recorded and you can access it on the mentalhealthkc.com website or the YouTube channel. You can also access your certificate of attendance as well at the link in the chat. I did see that somebody was having some trouble with that. So I'm going to see if I can find another link to also post, see if that helps.
I will say that this original video was a TikTok short by a lady. Her name is Katie Khan. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to share a TikTok link in this chat, but I know that if you Google pick up basketball lady TikTok, she'll be the first video that comes up. But it's worth the watch, I'll tell you that.
We do have a question in the question and answer. So the question is, what's your experience with play in the workplace? Have you seen any success in people integrating this into their jobs?
Well, I have a very different experience because, truth be told, I get to play all day in rehab and recreational therapy. However, what I will say is that what I guess colleagues and staff do not immediately recognize is when they join in with the games and recreational activities that we do with our patients, they get just as much benefit and they end up having more energy throughout the day. We end up having conversations with people that we normally would not have had. There's plenty of people that I met within the past year because we decided to play horse in the gym in our break time. I'm also the champion. If anybody tells you any differently, they don't work at CBM. And yeah, it opens up the floor for people to have better social skills, a better quality of life, and you get to meet people that you just have never met before. That's been my experience.
Somebody else also asks if there are longer trainings that you offer on this topic.
You know what? We'll have to go back to the drawing board because I would love to do that. Um, oh, Aaron, I'll be honest with you. I don't want to. I don't want to
We could
beat you
probably
in that.
take that one offline.
But I will. Yeah. But any time after noon, I have some time for horse. But I would love to do a longer presentation on this. I've only chose um three bodily systems this time. I would like to do a lot more because I love talking about that. Thank you, Robin.
We have a few more minutes, so if anybody else has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. So far, there isn't. There's a lot of things. That was really great. That was a great presentation.
Thank you so much. You know, if there's a chance to do it in person, I would love to because I like the conversation.
And there just might be.
Okay. Ooh, thank you, Bethany. Well, looks like we're closing out. Again, I appreciate y'all for listening. I think we maintained 40 plus people the whole time. That felt good.
If there's anybody else having some difficulties with signing in, I definitely recommend waiting um, maybe an hour or two to get in. The link might just, again, if we have too many people signing in, it just crashes. But I think I'm going to put my email in the chat. So for anybody, if you are still having issues a little bit later today, you can go ahead and email me and I will figure out what we need to do to get you that certificate.
You know what? I just thought about it. I think I want a certificate too. Again, thank you so much. I'm gonna head off. May
Yep.
do
I'll
some
stay on
play.
for just a few more minutes for anybody else that needs my email, but thank you, James, so much.
Thank you.